Good evening. Welcome to First United Methodist Church. I'm Pamela Dykehouse, the senior pastor here, and usually you see me in this place on Sunday mornings in our traditional service live stream. Today, on this evening, I am together with Dr. John Schultz, a member of our congregation, to talk with you about coming back together for in-person worship here at First UMC. Thank you, John, for your time and being with us this evening. I would love for you to tell the congregation, the audience, whoever's watching this evening, who you are and why you're my conversation partner tonight.
Well, I am Dr. John Edward Schultz. I grew up here and returned here after going to medical school to enter practice with my father, Dr. John Paul Schultz. And so for many years we practiced together. Now I'm practicing in my own office setting in that he is retired. But my wife and I are both practitioners here. Susan Schultz is a pediatrician, and so we have a good chance to talk about the issues that we're going to talk about today at night when we get back and discuss how we're going to go about dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
And so for several months, too many months now, since about April, I guess it was, we put together a restart team to look at the church's COVID response. And Dr. Schultz, both Dr. Schultzes, Susan and John, have been a part of that team. Just for those who haven't heard me describe this before, that team has included several of our church staff, our program staff, as well as the two Dr. Schultzes that we've mentioned, a couple of other healthcare professionals from our congregation who work in our community, some of our church's elected lay leaders, and an attorney from our church membership to guide the church's decision-making related to COVID. And now we're having this conversation because we have decided, the Restart team has guided this, that we're going to have in-person worship services resuming both here in the sanctuary, in the fellowship hall, in the church garden on Sunday, September 13th. So that's just a little over a week away, and we know that we have folks who still have questions about whether we should do that, how can we do that safely, whether they should be here once we are together in person. And some folks are, looking at what's going on in Corpus Christi and wondering, is now the time to do this? So let's talk about how things are here in Corpus Christi right now.
Well, clearly things today are so much better than they were a month ago. And quite frankly, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. We still have patients when I walk through the emergency rooms over at Christus Spawn, as well as over at HCA Doctors Regional, who are, you can tell, very ill. They are on ventilators or another form of respiratory support. So this hasn't gone away by no stretch of the imagination, but it's not anything like it was 6 to 8 weeks ago. 6 to 8 weeks ago was a surge of cases that was pretty much crippling to the medical community. It followed when it became apparent that we were not actually slammed as badly as the East Coast had been. And so that appearance was actually false in its presentation. We had a couple of weeks after Memorial Day. I was cycling up in the hill country with Susan, and we rode into Fredericksburg. It looked like Disney World. No one had masks on, except for Susan and I did. We slipped our masks on as we rode into town and looked around, thought it better to leave, and so we got back on our bikes and rode out.
Wow.
But that was very foreboding because it sort of set the tone of where everybody's mindset was. I think it was a false sense of security in that we had not seen what we hear yet, what was being seen on the East Coast and also in the Northwest Coast.
So you're saying that the behavior that you observed that Memorial Weekend time period is what precipitated the surge that we experienced in
Yes,
our
it
region?
did. That was an indicator to me that we didn't quite get it. We didn't quite
Mhm.
understand that we had not felt the wave. It was kind of the best way that I could think about it is like looking at a tsunami wave. As you look at it far away, it doesn't look like much.
Mhm.
But as you see it roll across the waves, all of a sudden you understand this is a big wave. And many people weren't looking. They were seeing the nightly news. They were not
Mhm.
believing the nightly news. And even today, I get these questions, is this a farce? Is this a hoax?
Mhm.
This is clearly not a hoax, and I've certainly lost friends. I've lost patients, and many others that will be debilitated for some time, if not
Mhm.
forever, secondary to the responses that they had to the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah. It has felt that way to me. I mean, I'm not seeing it from the healthcare perspective, but just in pastoral care conversations, most of that's on the phone for me these days, or FaceTime or Zoom or something. But yeah, there is still some skepticism, especially for folks who have not felt a personal impact, other than the fact that their lives have been limited in some way. They haven't experienced a loss, had someone close to them who is ill. So I think it's still kind of hard for some people to believe that it's real.
I think you're probably right. The other part of that was I did have the opportunity when that wave did hit us to be involved in some of the committees that were dealing with how to handle the COVID-19 surge. Also, being a private practitioner, going through and seeing my patients, but walking through the emergency departments at both Christa Spahn and at HCA Doctors Regional, it was incredible. It was clearly an overwhelming sense of we're drowning here.
Mm-hmm.
So having experienced that, it became very difficult for me to watch when community leaders would seem to think that it was not
Mm-hmm.
as serious as it is. It becomes very serious when it becomes personal, when you
Yeah.
lose somebody that you love, somebody that was important to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden it gets highlighted and you
Mhm.
understand. I'm sorry for anybody who has experienced that. I'm sorry that is what took to make this real. And I personally have felt the loss of friends, like I said, other
Mhm.
physicians, and other people in the community. You don't have to lose somebody that you know personally
Mhm.
to feel what it's like for the community to lose so many people.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the moment, that it became more real for me was when Rabbi Roseman passed away, because he was one of the earliest losses in our community, and a fellow religious leader who I did know personally. And, I grieved for that, even though I wasn't close to him. And I know that was a wake-up call for me to start paying more attention and thinking about what this meant for all of us.
I think that's what you refer to as sacrificial lambs.
Yeah, yeah. So where are we now? Besides the fact that we may still have people who are somewhat skeptical about, the need for all of the measures we're going to, where are we as a city or as a region right now as far as the presence of COVID, as we think about reopening the church for in-person worship? Has something changed that makes it okay or better for us to do this now than it did a couple of months ago?
Well, honestly, I am much more encouraged now. And I do think that we've reached a level of understanding that makes it possible for us to open up and come together as a church community and be careful about how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to get the second wave. People have referred to the surge that we experienced as the second wave. It was not. That
Okay.
was our first wave. And as we go into the fall and as our children go off to school,
Mm-hmm.
as people start coming back together and interacting more as we need to, then you're going to see, unfortunately, another spike, another surge. Some of it is because, unfortunately, our children have not been on the planet long enough to understand how it works. And we've seen and had a glimpse of what it is. And I think this is why it's possible for us to come back to church, is I think we've all had that understanding now, this is real, and if we wear our masks, if we follow the guidelines, if we watch our social distancing, if we take care of each other and protect each other, then we'll be fine. And that's
Okay.
what it takes.
So I heard the daily report here in Corpus Christi and was encouraged. You know, the numbers for several days have sounded better, but you're saying, you know, maybe we shouldn't become complacent and expect that those are going to stay low, because there are some things happening with school reopenings and maybe this other holiday weekend we're approaching that may turn that again.
Very true. And I think you're already seeing this. You're already seeing the nightly news talking about our campuses, some of the campuses here in Texas, some of the campuses away outside of Texas, where incredible numbers are being reported that, whereas they may be asymptomatic, numbers such as 1,000 students in one place, 650 students in another place. Well, you know, most of these kids, most of these young
adults
are healthy enough to handle this. But the fact that they carry the virus and the fact that they go back into the community, into the areas where there are others of us who may not be able to fend off or tolerate this illness, that's where you're going to see the second wave.
Okay. So we've got to keep that in perspective. We're talking about reopening the church. You're on the front lines every day, dealing with, you know, patients, some of whom you've diagnosed with COVID, quite a few, I understand. So how do you keep safe? I'm sitting here having a mask-free conversation with you from more than 6 feet apart, but what are you doing on a daily basis to not end up with it yourself?
I would like to say I have special superpowers. I don't.
I would like to have special superpowers too.
But I'll settle for protecting myself.
Okay.
I'll settle for watching the guidelines that we're talking about, being careful about the distance between us. We're clearly socially distanced at this point. At this point, we should be safe enough to have this conversation without masks. Now, when we come together in the church, I'm going to suggest that we always wear masks unless there's something that we're having to do without the mask. Just as an exercise so we don't forget, so that we're conscious of that effort of staying safe and keeping each other safe. So I'm still going to recommend, and I still will wear my mask while I'm sitting out here listening to you.
Okay. So we're saying that we're going to open church. We don't think that people are going to get infected here because of the measures that we're going to take. So where are people getting infected? Because we're supposed to be wearing masks everywhere we go. So how comes more people are getting sick?
Right. I think I got a little bit of sidelined there when I was kind of thinking about what I was saying. In my office, at one point, a month ago, we were seeing, and I think I remember telling you this, as few as maybe 4 positive COVIDs that we were diagnosing in a day, to as many as 10 to 12. And so I was in there, obviously. I didn't have some minion in there doing my work for me.
Doing the dangerous work.
But, you know, close and not distanced. I was there. I was wearing proper protective gear. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the surge, let's put it that way, both my wife and I were thinking, well, we had to have contact. We had to seroconvert. We must have been in contact, and we probably have antibodies. We don't.
Okay.
Wearing the mask, being careful with gloves. In our case, because we're swabbing, we have to wear gloves. And hand washing, and we also use masks.
Okay.
Because we're in a zone where if somebody sneezes or coughs, that we could potentially contract it through our conjunctiva. But going through and doing the very things that I was taught to do in medical school kept me safe.
Okay. So do you really think we can do it safely here in church?
Oh, I know we can. And I think, and I believe that each and every one of us is really fully capable of worrying about each other. And I think if we keep that always in mind, that, that yes, we can open up. Yes, we can do it safely. If I can do this in my office, and if I can go through the halls of the hospitals that had designated COVID wings and be in that environment and not get this, then I must be doing something right. Now, you also asked, where are we getting it? So the cases that I know, and I don't know all the stories, but I know enough of the stories that the cases that I'm aware of are healthcare professionals that did get sick. They got sick at home. They got sick when they went home, not when they're gowned up and ready for battle, into the thick of it all, but when they dropped their guard, when they saw their cousin that came in from Austin. Oh, it can't be him because, he's my cousin, he's my family.
Yeah.
How would he ever be a harm to me? And also there's a certain pressure that people feel if I don't open myself up freely and, embrace my cousin, then, then what's the purpose? Unfortunately, that's how this gets traveled into otherwise very safe people during the day, is dropping their guard, feeling comfortable around their loved ones, friends, or whatever, and just forgetting some of the basics. I mean, you don't have to necessarily wear a mask the whole time. When we have friends over, it's nice to sit outside. It's well ventilated. We've got seating that we can clearly sit this far away, or even 6 feet away, but the ventilation there is so much greater. The likelihood of getting a significant viral load or exposure is really low.
30-mile-an-hour wind gusts around here help. Yeah.
Exactly. That's correct.
So we won't have that kind of, the ventilation of the outdoors in here, but we have voluminous spaces in this church. We're going to wear masks in those spaces anyway. So would you just review the basic precautions that we are going to take when we get together here at church?
I will, but just to say, as I'm sitting here, this is not a stagnant air. You can feel the ventilation quite easily. Now, the precautions that we're going to take is, as people come in, and I really hope that people understand that this is for protecting them and our way of ensuring that they're protected as well as we're protected. That as you come in, we have thermal scan thermometers that we're going to use, and we do have a level that we're going to consider to be safe. We're going to ask that anybody identify if they have any worry about being ill, and if you have a worry about being ill, don't come home. Don't come to church.
Don't come back in the first place.
Not yet.
At least not then. Yeah.
But that's one, and we're going to still have the social distancing. We would like to escort people in, and also be able to dismiss people at the end of the service in an orderly fashion, so that we don't accidentally encroach on somebody else's 6 feet.
Right. So it'll take some patience to come back to church, because you'll have to wait your turn to enter, wait your turn to exit, and maybe not get to sit in your spot in the fellowship hall for contemporary service or in the sanctuary for traditional. But none of the exact same spots exist in the sanctuary right now anyway, because we did shift the spacing of the pews in this renovation. So maybe that'll help folks.
A rather small price to pay for coming back and being able to be in this beautiful sanctuary. Yeah.
So wear a mask, get your temperature checked on the way in, be asked some screening questions by our greeters, keep social distancing, be escorted to a seat. Those are the basic measures that we're going to follow.
Yes, ma'am.
Even when we're singing hymns, and we are going to sing hymns. Some churches are skipping that altogether, but we're going to sing, because we're going to be seated more than far enough apart and masked. And you feel comfortable with that personally, being a part of that?
I do, but I do want to, that's a very important part or point to make, is that because you're singing, that you aerosolize so much more. You're breathing out in a forceful fashion because you're singing and enjoying that, and that's why it's going to be important that as odd as it and uncomfortable as it might seem, let's wear a mask. Let's put one layer of protection out there so that if, as we sing and we aerosolized whatever we might have without knowing it,
Yeah.
that it has the opportunity to be caught and filtered and not escape.
So talk to us about masks.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I see all kinds of interesting things in the store. The mask below the nose, the mask hanging off the ear, all kinds of things. So, I don't know how we go about this exactly when somebody comes to the door and wants to come into worship, but can you give us some basic guidelines for how to do
Sure.
this safely and what qualifies as a
Absolutely.
sufficient mask?
And if you have any questions about this, the NIOSH, or that's National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, has a combined site with the CDC that goes over masks very, very well.
Okay.
And so if for some reason somebody wants to look a little further into this, I invite them to look online.
Okay.
But the biggest thing is that you want to have at least a couple of layers of fabric to breathe through in and out to be able to entrap or anything, any of these pathogens that might exist out there. I did bring some masks to go over
Okay.
and
well,
talk about. So
educate us.
Yeah.
I've got my one here. My sister's been sewing for me.
and that's lovely. I
It's
like that one.
2 layers, and it's got a little nose thing that helps it fit more firmly. What else?
Well, one of them that I use, and this is pretty standard sort of surgical mask. They're not rated beyond in a rating that would be useful in a clinical setting. It does not have the ability to be able to be in close with somebody who's clearly ill and who's clearly coughing and things like this. But it is adequate, and it's recommended that a mask along this line be used. Now, there are ways to wear a mask and there are ways not to wear a mask, like you said. Not under the nose. It should cover your nose and your mouth and fit tightly enough so as not breathe around without being filtered.
Okay.
So I'm going to slip this on. It may mess up the mic a little
Okay.
bit here. Sorry about that. This is pretty much how it should fit. Tightly enough around the cheek, come across and be tight enough here. And if you wear glasses, that's a big issue too. So you want to be able to tighten your mask right here, and it be tucked in tight enough here, so you're not breathing around
Okay.
around your.
So that your breath is being filtered through the mask rather than
exactly.
escaping.
And to that end, this works very well. It's not one that you could use multiple times. Some of the other masks that are recommended, I like the fabric masks. They're quite stylish. You can get some very, very
We
clever.
had a seamstress in the church who made some lovely ones for a lot of
And
folks.
this is one that was given to me that is functional. I use this when I go to the gym to work out, and because it doesn't get wet, and when it does get wet, we can dry it out. But the other one that I'm very fond of was made by one of my patients, and I like it because it's very comfortable. It fits very nicely, like here. And again, I'm not sure this is picking up right, but again, it fits across the nose well, fits around the side well, and tucks in
Okay.
under here. So the couple of, I think there are 3 layers to this one. There's an inner layer that is a filtering type layer. These can be washed, and as long as you don't over bleach them, then the fabric should stay good.
Okay.
Good enough to be able to be an adequate filter, and that's one
So-
of the things.
Yeah, so speaking of fabric, I want to ask one more mask question, and then we need to move on. I know Brandy's going to give me a warning here in a minute. Gaiters, neck gaiters. I see a lot of those now.
I was going to come to the negative sign just
Oh,
like,
okay.
but this is in N95. This is something that you use in a clinical setting. I'll be faster about this since it's not a fashion show, but it's much tighter, and 95% of all particles will be filtered by this, and then N95 for the National Institute of occupational safety.
Oh, okay.
That's where the N
Okay.
comes from. That it is rated to be, and is considered a set fit. In other words, it has to fit and be really tight. These are two masks that you cannot really condone or support. This is one that has been popular. I've seen people use these ventilated trap masks so that as you breathe out, it's less effort because it's a sort of a trap valve. As you breathe in, it filters everything in. These are great for working in your workshop, but because you breathe out and it's not filtered, then you become a risk,
Okay, so it's protecting you,
but not
but
your
not
friends.
your friends. Okay.
And this is the other thing that I've seen people do, is try to put a filter on and wear this about. It doesn't do anything about filtering here. This is really good for if you're in an emergency environment, clinical setting, somebody's coughing, and it protects you that way, but it doesn't really have any true place in our overall daily
Okay.
work.
Okay.
So it's not really recommended. Gaiters, the reason that they're so popular in fishermen and things like that is it protects you from the sun, and it doesn't interfere with your breathing. You breathe very easily through it. To that end, it doesn't filter.
Okay. So
No gaiters.
if you show up at church with one of those, we may have a disposable, like the first one that you showed us,
absolutely.
that we can
We'll have
offer. But
some.
we hope you'll show up with your own. She's given us our warning
Okay.
here. So if we're taking these measures, is it okay for high-risk people to come to church?
Good question. And I really, to begin with, I would like to discourage that.
Okay.
My personal feelings are, if you're at high risk, let's get this a run first and see how everybody's feeling and feeling more comfortable. Are we able to be careful with the way we come in and worship? Are we able to handle this in a fashion that would allow somebody who may be immunocompromised or elderly or otherwise some other form of illness that might put them at risk? A lot of this is using common sense, and especially early on, until we get our dance step down.
Okay. Okay. So it's a personal decision, but if you know that you have particular risks,
I would hold off yet.
hold off. Okay. So sometimes when worship leaders are up front, like we're up front in the sanctuary right now, when I'm preaching, when Paul is leading music with voice, we are not wearing our masks. Why is that okay?
Well, that's an excellent question, and we've talked about this in our leadership meetings, because there's a level of dispersion or a distance of dispersion where whatever I breathe out disperses into the air and basically will not be supported and will not survive to find another person to live in.
Okay.
And that's one thing. There's also the concept of viral load. In order to get this enough of virus into a person to create disease is also another fundamental concept of infectious disease. So this distance, it would be very hard, even if I were to sneeze, for you to get enough of a viral load
Okay.
to cause disease.
Okay. So you will see some of your worship leaders up front in the sanctuary and fellowship hall who are unmasked at times, but we'll be far enough away that it's safe.
Right, and
for
it
the
is safe, and
congregation.
no, you're not going to get hit by a COVID virus in the first floor.
But you can sit further back if you don't want to be that close to me.
True.
You'll have to ask the person who is seating you for that, though. This is your home church. You're not just the doctor that we invited in for the interview. This is your place. What are your personal thoughts and feelings about getting to come back together to worship?
I'm very happy to be sitting right here, right now, looking at this beautiful sanctuary. Grew up in this church. I remember when the pillars were just I-beams that reached up into the sky when I was really young at that time.
Okay.
And still had not placed the facade, the wood placking on it.
Wow.
I wasn't supposed to be back here, but kind of worked my way in and looked up at these beautiful, fantastic steel girders reaching up into the sky.
Wow.
And that is one of my most fantastic memories of just spending time looking at the architecture of this place.
Mm-hmm.
Other things, I got married here. My sister's ashes are in the columbarium. The roots are here. So many
Yeah.
experiences are here. One of my favorite remembrances of just seeing the church was from the water. One night, sailing back, we were way too young to be doing this, but we left we sailed to race over to Port A, and on the way back, we didn't want to stay overnight. Sailing back, as you came and left the channel into the bay, you could see one point all the way across over there that was bright, brilliant, and beautiful. It's like the North Star coming across that. And many times just sitting there thinking, if I set my course there and keep my eye on the church, I'll be on the right path. And that has carried over so many different times that as I got closer and closer, you could see the steeple a little better, a little sharper. And as I've gone through my life, I thought, yes, if you set your path on that one place, you'll be okay.
Beautiful image. Thank
Yeah,
you. I hadn't heard that story from you before.
I don't think I've ever told anybody that story.
Well, see, if you come to our live streams, you get special information. You made me think as well, as you talked about seeing the structure before it was complete, how when we were renovating and the flooring was bare, the cement was bare, that we came in and wrote blessings, prayers, messages. And I hadn't really thought about that since coming back in and seeing it complete, but coming back to that, for those who weren't around when it was built the first time, around this place, it's
truly coming home.
Yeah, it is. So just to be sure that those who are watching with us tonight understand, let's recap the guidelines for September 13th and onward. Just real quick, recap what to expect when you get here.
As you come in through the entrances, and I believe we're going to be on the side here, and also coming out of the back parking
And
lot.
then for the service in the fellowship hall, they'll come in through the patio entrance.
Oh, okay, excellent. Expect to be greeted. Your temperature, your forehead taken. The couple of questions: Are you well? Have you been? Do you have any issues that we need to know about? Something along that line. Nothing too intrusive. But then wait with 6 feet away from the person in front of you for one of our ushers to seat you.
Okay.
Very simple, and we hope not to cause you any difficulties. If you should show up and you don't have a mask, we will have a mask for you.
Yeah.
But we really hope that you take in consideration that this is for you, this is for your friends.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we always watch out and take care of our brethren.
Right, right. So that brings me to kind of wrapping this up, and I've thought and I've shared with the congregation and some other things that we've recorded, a reminder about John Wesley's, they're called the general rules of Wesleyan community life back into the 1700s, and they're 3 simple rules: do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. Now, Wesley didn't say stay in love with God. He said attend upon the ordinances. But to translate that, it is about doing the things that help us to stay in love with God, and that includes worshiping together. So I think that we have a plan in place for doing no harm. It will do much good for us to be together so that we can multiply that good in our daily lives, and we will be able to continue to grow deeper in our love for God by resuming worship together. We are going to still have our online offerings for those who do decide that they need to stay home, or the congregation that we've gathered that is not even in Corpus Christi since we've been online. So that'll still be there for you. John, I really appreciate your time. Thank you, and Susan, for serving on our Restart team and for your time and talking with me tonight. Hopefully to just give a little more information and help folks make their decisions and be ready to come back together. So we're going to be opening again September 13th with 7:30 worship service outdoors in the garden. And you do not have to wear a mask there. We will maintain the distancing. Bring your own chair for that service. And then 9 o'clock in the fellowship hall for our contemporary service. coming in through the patio entrance. Then 11 o'clock here in the sanctuary, using both the columbarium entrance and the hallway entrance from the main parking lot adjacent to the sanctuary. And we will continue to have yoga chapel as live stream only for the time being because of the mask requirement. And then just so you know, if you've stuck with us this long through it tonight, you might have already heard it trickling out. We are working on plans for safely reopening Sunday school classes maybe a month or so later, depending on conditions in Corpus Christi, but that's the plan that we're working toward at this time. So we're hoping to be able to do that on the first Sunday of October. Thank you again, John. Thank you, Brandy Hernandez, for our technical support tonight, and for all of you. And this will be saved on our YouTube page, and there's a link on Facebook as well in case you want to look at it again or share it with somebody else. Have a good evening.